A common question I get asked is beekeeping difficult? Or how hard is it to actually be a beekeeper? So that's what I'm going to answer in this video, because really beekeeping isn't that difficult. I mean, you have bees, they feed themselves, they gather water, they guard the hive, they cool it down when it's hot, they plug up holes in the hive with propolis when they need to, they disinfect the hive. They are pretty self-sufficient creatures, and they live in the wild all on their own just fine. But there are ways in which beekeeping is hard, and there are ways that you can make beekeeping a lot easier for yourself. So to start, when you're getting started, beekeeping is going to be a lot harder than after you've been doing it 3 or 4 years. You know, with everything, you got to get the hang of it, you got to get the feel for it, you start to develop a little bit of intuition, you start to see common things over and over again, and it gets easier. One really great way to make those first few years a whole lot easier, like a whole lot easier, and is why whenever you ask any beekeeper, I want to get started keeping bees, what should I do? They tell you to take a class, go to a bee club, or find a mentor. The reason why is because you can either make all of those mistakes yourself and learn the hard way how to keep bees, or you can talk to somebody that knows what they're doing and they can help you. And that could be, you know, just shadowing somebody that you know with beehives and learning on the job with them. That could be taking a class, or that could be with our online classes, which is why we also offer mentorship, because I think it's really important to have that person to ask questions along the way. That will make beekeeping so much easier than if you just try to watch some YouTube videos and go to Facebook groups and ask questions, because you're going to get a million answers and you don't even know if these people know what they're talking about. This might be somebody that's in their first year keeping bees too. So first of all, I want to talk about the numbers. When you know what to expect, beekeeping is a lot easier. And the thing is that the reason why a lot of people think beekeeping is hard is because their expectations of what it means to be a beekeeper and what you're going to see as a beekeeper are incorrect, in my opinion. Now, out in nature, they say is the average beehive is going to swarm 1 to 2 times. So instead of 1 hive at the start of spring, you now have 3 hives. And that is because 2/3 of the hives aren't going to make it. And as a beekeeper, you need to know this, because to think that you are going to buy 1 package of bees and this package of bees is going to be magical and perfect and everything's going to go fine and this package of bees is going to survive all of the seasons and make it to next spring is just inaccurate, and it's an unfair expectation of what the bees are supposed to be doing and what you're supposed to be doing as a beekeeper. So they always say start with 2 packages of bees, and that's because when you buy them, 1 package is probably going to be pretty good and 1 package is probably going to be meh, because you have genetics, and some bees have the genetics to prosper and some don't, because not all bees aren't robots. They aren't made all the same, and some are going to survive in nature and some aren't, and some are going to survive for the beekeeper and some aren't. So if you go into beekeeping thinking that every hive is going to survive, and if they don't, it's your fault, you are ultimately going to fail in your mind and you're going to give up, because there's only so many times you're going to want to fail before you don't want to do it anymore, and it's not going to be an enjoyable thing for you. So when you understand that 2 out of every 3 hives don't make it, you say, okay, now you start with 2 beehives. Well, if 2/3 make it and 2/3 don't make it and 1/3 does, you're still really not at that point that you can somewhat guarantee that you're going to still have a beehive in a year. And that's where a class comes in handy. You learn how to split a hive, and you learn how to now have 3 or 4 hives. And then the chances that you're going to still have a hive come the spring of next year have greatened quite a bit. And there's actually a pretty slim chance that you won't have any bees come spring of next year. So I don't want to get too complicated in this and get too much into like what it means to split a beehive and stuff, but just understand that beekeeping ultimately is animal husbandry. And most people, including myself, don't get into beekeeping because they're looking to breed animals. It's because they love bees, they think they're fascinating. But a lot of beekeeping is animal husbandry. So you buy 2 beehives. One beehive is strong, one beehive is weak. You want to replace the weak beehive with the genetics from another queen that is better genetics. So now you have 2 strong beehives. And then you can take those 2 strong beehives and split them to make 3 strong beehives. You go into winter with 3 strong beehives. Now the chances that you are at least one of them is going to survive is pretty great. And that's when you start to succeed as a beekeeper, and beekeeping gets a whole lot easier. Now, what's easy about beekeeping is the week-to-week stuff that you're doing. I mean, you're not checking on the beehive every day. You're not giving them food every day. Once a week, when it's really warm out and they're very active, which is usually mid to late spring, all through the summer, maybe early fall. Open the beehive once. You're going to spend 30 to 45 minutes per beehive inspecting it. You really just open it up, pull out the frames, look to see if there's eggs, larvae, and capped brood. You want to see their manner. Are they stinging you? Are they seeming angry, or are they going about their business? Do they have enough food? And I have an inspection sheet if you'd like to see it. The link to it, where you can download it from our blog, is in the description of this video down below. And it's a pretty simple, straightforward process. And that's really what you do week to week. Now, sometimes there are problems, and that's where the challenges come up. Does this make beekeeping hard? Well, for some people, maybe. Personally, that's what makes beekeeping interesting for me still 10 years later, is that sometimes you see something, you're like, oh, I've never seen that before. That's interesting. And what I think is important to know is what you need to do is, if you see something and you don't know what to do, you've never seen it before, close up the beehive. Do nothing. It is way better to do absolutely nothing than to do something if you're not sure it's going to help the bees. When you just accept the bees for who they are and what your role is as a beekeeper, I think you will not find beekeeping so difficult. Now, I'm not saying to just put bees in a box and leave them and not do anything. I'm just saying that you need to understand what your role is and to not be overeager in trying to fix every single problem. You need to trust that they know what they're doing, because bees have been around way longer than humans have been. And their instincts for what they need to do are pretty spot on most of the time. Now, one thing that actually does make beekeeping difficult, in my opinion, especially when I was pregnant, and especially since I've moved to Hawaii, because I did have bees in Philadelphia and this wasn't so bad. But then I moved to Hawaii and I opened up a beehive in the sun, in a full-length suit, with leather sting-proof gloves and a veil on, and I sweat my butt off. I have literally seen drops of sweat fall off on my face and land on bees, and then they're just like, what the hell? Beekeeping in the heat is no fun. Now, as you get used to beekeeping and around the bees, I take my gloves off. I just wear a veil, baggy lightweight pants, a baggy lightweight long sleeve shirt. I do not wear the full suit most of the time. And when you get more comfortable around bees, you can start to wear lighter protective gear. But until then, you're really going to want to open up the beehive early in the morning if you know it's going to be a hot day, because most of the time you don't want your bees in the shade, especially if you have to deal with small hive beetle issues, or else small hive beetles can really destroy a hive that's in a wet, shady spot. So If you have a pop-up tent you can put over your 2 beehives while you check them, that's another option, but usually early in the morning is a good time to open up your beehive. And that is probably one of the most difficult parts I found about beekeeping, is what to do in the summer heat. They do make full-length suits that are made out of breathable fabric but are also sting-proof. They are pretty pricey, but something that you can purchase if you want to. I wouldn't make that investment until you've had bees for at least a year, because you might have super sweet calm bees and that suit might not even be necessary. The other part about how much hard work beekeeping is just the physical aspect of it. If you start beekeeping, I always recommend to beginners to start with a Langstroth style beehive, which are the hives behind me. They're boxes stacked up, and the boxes you're picking up individually. You're not picking up the whole stack at once unless you need to move your entire beehive for some reason, which is rare if ever. But each of those boxes that have honey in them can weigh upwards of 30 pounds. And so 30 pounds isn't so bad for most people, but if that is difficult for you, then there are other options that you would want to start out with, like a long Langstroth style hive. You can get like an 8-frame box, and that's lighter than say a 10-frame box, and you can have a honey super, which are the uppermost boxes of my hives, versus mediums or deeps. But I just want to warn you, the flow hive makes honey harvesting easier, but if you have difficulty lifting heavy equipment, do not buy a flow hive, because I have one, and I'm in pretty good shape, but I do almost dread opening that beehive up when it is summertime and the beehive is full of honey. Honey harvesting isn't difficult, but it's just physically a lot of work. And so that is usually just one full day, especially if you have under, I'd say, 5 beehives. That's one full day of either squishing honeycomb with a fork or putting it in your extractor and then putting it into bottles. So a few things I wanted to just mention as well is that what makes beekeeping challenging, maybe not difficult but challenging, is that you're still going to see new things. We know a lot about bees, but there's a lot we don't know about bees, and no 2 hives are the same. These are not domesticated animals, and you're going to see new things. 10 years into beekeeping, 20, 30, you're never going to just know everything. No beekeeper knows everything. No entomologist knows everything about bees. Eva Crane spent her life traveling the world learning about bees and beekeeping, and she never claimed to know everything about bees. So she can write an 800-page book about bees and beekeeping and still not know everything. You're not going to know everything either. If that sounds like fun, if you like the challenge, then beekeeping is a great hobby, and I don't think that it's too difficult. I don't think it's something that you need special education to try on your own. But if you want something that's a recipe that just tells you step by step what to do, then I think beekeeping is going to seem incredibly difficult for you, and it's not going to be fun, which is more so what's important, is that you actually enjoy it. And personally, I am working on a garden. It's a very slow work in progress, and I find gardening incredibly hard. I find beekeeping so much easier. So if you are a gardener and you're thinking beekeeping is too difficult, you got this. The reason why is because you have one animal, the bee, and they have one main big pest that you need to worry about. Small hive beetle, maybe a distant second. For the most part, you have a varroa mite. You have like a handful of problems and things that you're going to see with your bees, and just a few pests that you're going to have to deal with. You have a harvest season, and when that harvest is done, you can even put treatments in and not worry about harming the harvest. It's so much easier than plants because, for one, you have a variety of plants. So you have a variety of pests on all of these plants. You have some things like here in Hawaii, what do I do about the pickle worm? Someone told me to put a cloth over my plant every single night because it's a moth that comes at night. Am I going to put a cloth over my plant every single night? No, I'm not going to remember to do that. I have a 2-year-old. I hardly remember what I did an hour ago. I'm not going to do that. It's a lot more work, and I feel like there's a lot less information to help you when you're gardening because there's just so many different varieties and kinds of vegetables and herbs and things that you can grow. So in comparison to some hobbies, so much easier. That being said, if you're looking for a hobby like beer brewing or you know, maybe like woodworking or things that you can pick up and do when you have a free Saturday and then leave, that's not beekeeping. When you are on vacation for 2 weeks, you're going to have to do things to prepare your hive so that you can leave them alone for 2 weeks. When there's a problem, you're going to have to deal with it. You can't just leave it until you have the time to deal with it. In the winter time, there's not a lot to do, but when it's warm out, there will be things to do, and you are going to, for the most part, have to go by the bee schedule, not your own. So that's what I think makes beekeeping hard, and the things that I think people think are hard about beekeeping that don't necessarily have to be. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out our free ebook, The 7 Steps to Getting Started Keeping Bees. You can download it right at our website, beekeepingmadesimple.com. Hit the subscribe button and then hit the bell icon if you want to get emails from YouTube when we put up a new video, which is every week.